to Mom in Mind, a podcast about maternal mental health from conception, pregnancy, to birth and postpartum. Real stories from moms and family members who've made it from struggling to wellness, and interviews with experts and advocates who work for moms and families to get the help they need. We discuss very real struggles that can sometimes be hard to hear, but these are stories that need to be told so that moms and families can know that healing is possible. This podcast is meant to offer information and awareness and is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Thank you for being with us today. Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about Latina mothers and maternal mental health. Our guest, Susana Marquez, is a licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Me, Myself, and Mommy Therapeutic Services, which is a private practice out of Long Beach, California. She's going to be sharing some of her personal story today and a little bit about how she made her way through. She's going to give us other perspectives on Latina mothers and maternal mental health. She's also going to talk with us a little bit about the term Latinx and what that means and how we can be using that term more sensitively in our work with birthing persons of Latin descent. Susana provides psychotherapy, support, and resources to Latina mothers and their families on what maternal mental health is and the importance of mothers' mental health and emotional well-being. Her mission is to bridge the gap, Latina mothers and mental health, while bringing awareness to the real issues that mothers face culturally and socially. So let's meet Susana. Welcome, Susana. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Kat. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know we've touched base on social media and such an interesting place to get connected with people. I've been following your work and really love what you're doing. Wanted to have you come on and talk a little bit about that today. So I'm excited to share this with the listeners.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really excited about it too.
Yeah. So before we get into the work that you're doing now, maybe we can talk about how you got started doing the work that you're doing and your personal experience. So if you'd like to start anywhere you're comfortable.
No, absolutely. Well, the reason I started what I'm currently doing is for my own personal story with postpartum depression and anxiety. After I had my son in 2014, I definitely had a very, just really, really bad time adjusting to motherhood and kind of felt more alone than anything and just felt the need to connect with other moms, but it was very hard to find that connection and just, going to the doctor and hearing, well, it's normal, it's just, part of being a mom. And I felt tired all the time and just a big disconnect with what was expected of me and what I was doing. I just felt like I was failing the entire time. And even though the birthing experience was nothing out of the normal, there were things that didn't go the way I originally had planned or what I wanted and so forth. And the timing was a little earlier than the due date they had given me. And so, it's not like you walk it wasn't like that for me. I walked into the hospital room and everything was just great and so forth. There was a few hiccups along the way, and I definitely my labor plan changed from what I had originally wanted. And I wasn't fully aware at the time of all the different ways that I could advocate for myself while giving birth, like I am aware of now. So it's something that I feel that even though you go through these classes, there's way more information out there about how to have a birth plan and a doula, and something that I didn't even know existed until, probably last year when I met a few of my friends now that are doulas and so forth. So coming home and, my husband having to go back to work probably about 4 or 6 weeks after, and it was just me and the baby. And then I just felt like, oh, well, if I go out, something might happen. So that anxiety was immediately palpable for me, the fear of like something's going to happen when we're out. What am I going to do by myself? My mom was here to take care of me, but what happens is in our culture, it just seems that you must have it all together at all times when being a mom. There's no absolute way to describe that you don't have it together, because if you do, then you seem questionable as a mother to begin with. So it's something that I felt instantly where I'm like, oh God, if I tell my mom that I'm not aware of what I need to do, or that I'm struggling with this, she's going to look at me and say, well, you wanted to have a kid. Like this is just the way it is. You have to suck it up in a sense. And so I had grown up hearing that from other women in my family. So it was something that was ingrained with me. And I just kind of felt that I couldn't share the way I was feeling because I just had to get it together. I had to, put the best face forward and put the, best foot forward and go with it. And so there was no way around it. So a lot of times I just didn't want to go out because I didn't want to deal with the hassles of having to pack everything up. And then when I did go out, I felt like I was always rushing because my son was exclusively breastfeeding. So I always felt like it was, that cluster feed of I have to feed like every so often. And I don't have time for myself. I don't have time to shower. I don't have time to do this or the other. And then if I go out, then I have to pack all of this other stuff with me and lug, the pump and this and that, and then the carrier. And so it just felt like the best thing for me was to not even do those things. Right. And all of my friends didn't have children. So it's just very difficult to connect with them. People kind of fell off the face of the earth. There wasn't much people checking in on me. And so I felt isolated and I felt alienated. And I felt kind of like, wow, having a baby is supposed to be the happiest moment of your life, but it definitely doesn't feel that way for me. It definitely doesn't feel like people are coming to check in on me. It's just like, oh, how's the baby doing? That's great. But no one's asking me how I'm doing. Or it felt that when people did come in, it was very invasive because, they weren't warning me that they were going to stop by. It was just they stopped by and I wasn't in no way, shape or form to host. I didn't want to have people over. So it was this tug of war between wanting to have people support you, but not wanting to have anyone because the instinct of mother kicked in right away that no one knew how to take care of my son better than I did, even though I had no clue what I was doing at some point. I was just like, no, my mom's not going to be able to do it. Even before I raised, I don't know how many siblings. So it was like, still, that doesn't make you an expert. Like you don't know what you're supposed to do with my son because he's my son and only I know what he needs. Right. And same with my mother-in-law. Well, I had 4 kids, and I've done it before and it's not like rocket science. And I still felt like, no, you still don't know what to do because again, you don't know what my son needs. It was really difficult because then when I did find a group of moms that I connected with, it felt very superficial. It felt very superficial. It felt very still that my needs weren't being understood. They didn't have the sleepless nights, or if they did, they didn't talk about those things. It felt very kind of, I don't know if the word phony fits, but more of like, oh, everything's great. That may have been their situation, but for me, that wasn't. So I felt very disconnected. And I felt that if I share something dark or negative here, they're going to look at me and say, she is a complete weirdo. We don't want to hang out with her anymore. And so I just shut down. I shut down and it was very hard because I spent a lot of nights, crying and feeling incompetent. And I clung to my son like he was like the only person that understood me, even though this, poor human being of life was like needing me to survive. And I was like the opposite. I felt I needed him in order to survive. And after he turned a year, I started seeing a bit of light where I was like, okay, it's going to get easier because now he's walking. We can go out and do more stuff and we can go have fun. And then it didn't happen that way because then my dad tragically passed away and I'm an only child.
Oh, so, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I remember my son was 14 months when I got the call that, he was in the hospital and it was an emergency situation and ICU. And here I am with the little one waiting to feed him lunch. And I honestly can't tell you how I made it to the hospital from the house, which isn't that far, and how I put him in the car seat without an issue. I don't know. It feels like a blur from that moment. And I'm thankful that we made it, safely there. But I felt completely zombie-ish, like that. I was just going through the motions and not really knowing what was going on or really processing what was happening. And so having to sit in that moment and, my husband shows up later because he was at work and I called him and then, I'm there with a 14-month-old in the ICU, which, they're like, is there anyone here with you? And I'm like, no, it's not like I can leave him with someone. to come sit here. I have
Right.
to have him here. And so I also felt like, oh my God, I'm traumatizing my child. And it was very difficult. So that
Yeah.
made me spiral out of control even more. That
Sure.
definitely put me in a more severe state of depression and
Yeah.
anxiety. And I did definitely cling to my son even more. And then I was even more afraid to let go of him and give him to anyone to take care of, because I was like, I already, as my dad was in a coma and passed away 5 days later.
Oh, wow.
And so in my head, I'm like, if I already lost someone, I'm not going to lose you too. So I did everything I could to cling to him and say like, no one's going to take care of him but me. You guys
Right.
can't take care of him. So I was sacrificing every inch in me because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't
Right.
eating. I lost a tremendous amount of weight at that time, like really, really bad. And people were highlighting how much weight I had lost, and they thought it was the most wonderful thing and what was my secret.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, every time someone pointed out how thin I was and how great I looked because I had lost so much weight, so rapidly,
Wow.
I always thought to myself, you have no clue how much like crap I truly, truly feel.
Right.
And I could never say it, but inside I'm like, you have no clue how even more like crap that comment makes me feel.
Right.
Because it wasn't something I was working towards. It was something that was happening because I was such a mess emotionally.
The whole situation is so difficult. You're already dealing with so much. And then on top of that, you have this really tragic event and loss. And wow, as you were talking about it, I've heard, so much struggle in just this very short period of time. And obviously none of this was expected. And,
absolutely not.
Right. And here you are just having to just hold on as tight as you can to your son as kind of a way to get through. I mean, I hear the amount of anxiety that you must have had.
Absolutely. Yes. It was very, very difficult. And, then having to help my mom go through her grieving process and realizing that I still needed to be available for my son. And then it's having to put all the services together. So I didn't have enough time to grieve. I didn't have enough time to actually take for myself to process what was going through, because I felt like I was just always having to do something to take care of everyone else. So I was definitely the last person I was taking care of. I definitely put myself on the back burner, and it made things even more complicated for me because, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I wasn't processing the grief. I started noticing how much angrier I was at everybody around me, at everyone else that was, trying to support me. I didn't want to deal with anyone. And I just felt that if people could not sense what was going on with me, who knew me and cared about me, then it's like, what's the point in telling you? It's like, if you can't figure it out by now, I felt a lot of resentment too. I felt like if I can sense that something's wrong with you, then why can't you do the same for me? And none of this was being expressed. It was just something that I thought that those voices in my head and those questions and that inner turmoil of why can't people understand what I'm going through? Why can't people step up and say, I'm going to stop over and bring you a plate of food? Why pretend like, oh, everything should be back to normal just because, time's passed, or that that comment that I hear a lot when people pass away, like time heals all wounds. And I'm like, how is time supposed to heal this one? That's just another reminder of that person not being here.
Right.
Like I have to live with knowing that he's not going to be here for the holidays, or he's not going to see his only grandson, go to school, and just different milestones.
Right.
And then because it was a tragic accident, it happened close to home. So it was something else that caused even more anxiety when driving down the street and trying to avoid that specific location and going around it so that I'm not driving on that street, just different things that were triggers that I now was more anxious about, because now I'm like, I have to avoid this. I don't want to go down this street. I don't want to drive to this location, and so forth. So yes, the depression and the anxiety just got even more out of control.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the summer of 2016 that I realized, I had kind of done a checklist in my head as a clinician, that I'm like, this doesn't seem right. At some point I was telling myself, this doesn't seem that I should be feeling this way, and I kept asking myself, do other moms feel this way? And I didn't have, that's the thing, I didn't have any other moms to connect with. My cousins who were moms had older kids. I was afraid of telling my mom. And, she was grieving herself. So then I'm like, I don't want to bother her with this. My husband had no clue because my husband always just kept reminding me of how strong I used to be before. And I think he just thought that this was going to pass and I should automatically get back to my normal self.
Right.
But I kept thinking, this doesn't feel normal. This doesn't feel right. And it wasn't until literally 2 years in summer of 2016 that I was sitting down with a colleague and she said, we were having lunch and she said, I need you to go see someone. And I said, what do you mean you need to see someone? This is too much for you. You seem to be holding it together pretty well, but that's not the case. And she referred me to the therapist that I'm currently seeing that happened to break the news to me last week that he's leaving next month. And so that was bittersweet because when she referred me to him, she called him right away and she said, do you have any openings? And I immediately remember asking her, is he male? I said, oh, he's a man. And then she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I questioned it immediately. Mm-hmm. I had seen therapists before that, and I had seen a therapist while I was in graduate school and working way before I had my son, who I had connected with wonderfully, but then she ended up leaving to out of state, so I couldn't see her, during that process. So when she said, I want you to go see him, I'm like, oh, he's a man. She's like, please go. So, a part of me was desperately wanting to see someone too. So I went with it, even though I had my hesitations about, oh, he's a male and he is Latino, but he is a man. Is he really going to understand my journey, what I'm going through? But I have to say, Kat, that clinician really broke. And I told him this last week when he mentioned that he's leaving, broke every stigma that I could possibly have about what to expect from a Latino male in general. And as a clinician, even more, because he has been the most compassionate and most empathic and supportive male figure that I have had in this process that has left me just wondering, like, will I ever find anyone like that? I truly doubt it because I came in a complete mess. I remember we were talking about this last week, how when I came in, I just couldn't stop crying. I couldn't even really get my words out. And I was with Isaac and I was holding on to him desperately for life as he was trying to do his assessment. And I remember that I just bawled like for the entire 2 hours that I was there. And he reminded me, look at where you're at now. So I've seen him exactly for 2 years. And it was that friend who said, like, I need you to go see him. And I remember when I saw her, she made an appointment for me for the following week. And I went. Great. I'm like, I'm going to go and check it out. And I did have my moments of hesitation at the beginning where I'm like, he probably has no clue what I'm going through. He probably doesn't even have kids and doesn't know what that process, what that's like and so forth. But it was completely the opposite of all of that. He was so understanding. And like I said, I'm so grateful that I did go. But that's when I realized, okay, I definitely am not the only one who has felt this way. I'm sure there are other moms who have felt this way. And then I started thinking of all the cultural stigmas that we carry as Latina moms, where we're thinking, okay, we're compared and held up high like the Virgin Mary. That's like the biggest example of motherhood for us.
Mothers are everything.
Exactly. Mothers are everything, and they sacrifice everything. And it does, even if it means you don't eat and don't sleep, well, that's what being a mother is. And so I'm like, I'm sure that they're looking for a support system too. I'm sure that they're needing these resources. I'm sure that they're probably not even wanting to have one-on-one therapy because they want to hear the mother next to them say the same thing. Or if they are looking for one-on-one therapy, how, likely will it be that they will find this stuff if, let's say, they are lacking the financial resources for therapy, or there's a language barrier and they can't, communicate with the clinician.
Right.
So that's when I started thinking of how can I put my clinical skills and my education to use, because I also felt a huge part of my identity was gone. I felt I've gone to school for all these years. I finished my doctorate right when I found out that my son was pregnant. And so I'm like, I'm in my last classes and this is amazing. It worked out fine that, I'm now finding out that I'm pregnant, but I'm also finishing up my doctorate. So I don't have to, worry about that. The only thing I knew that I had to work on was my dissertation.
Oh.
And in my mind, I thought, okay, I'll work on my dissertation as my son sleeps, I'll make it happen and all that kind of thing. You go in with this idea of how you want things to be, and it ended up being the complete opposite of that.
Right.
So I felt like a huge sense of me, like a real huge part of my identity was gone.
Right.
And so I missed work. I missed, the connection with other clinicians and networking. I missed client work. I missed going to school. And I couldn't get myself to work on my dissertation. And I kept, trying. I kept trying to sit down in front of the computer and write.
Right.
But it didn't happen. So I then, kicked myself in the butt for that, where I was like, I'm not going to get this done. I'm a failure. So I felt like a failure in every aspect.
Yeah, there's so much here around just, so much feelings of failure. I mean, how do you push through that?
Exactly. So then I felt maybe if I start something for other moms and I start start working again, or putting my skills and even now my personal story to use for other moms, maybe I will start feeling like myself again. Maybe this will be cathartic for me as well, and therapeutic for me too,
right?
Because I also need that. And so in talking to my therapist, spending nights, awake while Isaac slept and just brainstorming and thinking of things that I felt were lacking in the mental health field for moms. And because I'm like, my God, we didn't hear about this stuff in grad school. How,
right?
Did we even touch base on postpartum depression and anxiety? So all the terminology that I was hearing too was also something so new to me. And I thought, there's got to be more to this. There has to be more. So that's when I started researching, and just Googling. And that's how I came about Maternal Mental Health Now. And I remember when I found their website and their agency, I actually smiled and was like, aha, there is something. Let me connect with them. And then I started brainstorming. I'm like, what do I want to provide? What do I want to do for mothers?
Good for you.
How can I help? And so, it took a while, and it took some definitely, my therapist was very supportive. And then I talked to my husband about it, and he's like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be able to provide? And I said, that's where, I'm trying to figure out what's missing. And then I realized a lot is missing.
A lot is
There's
missing.
really
That's
not a lot of literature in Spanish to begin with. There's really not then I started researching what's out here in my area. And I'm like, what do we have out here? Do we have services for moms out here in Spanish? Do we have support groups? Do we have activities for them? Do we have, resources, agencies that provide these services? And then I started cold calling agencies. Like I started getting more active, and I started calling organizations. I started calling nonprofits. I started calling hospitals. And a lot of times people hung up on me, didn't return my calls. I left many messages. I emailed people and I didn't get responses back. And I realized, that did sadden me, and that did, make me kind of sit back on my idea and think, well, maybe I'm trying to do something that no one's going to want to be a part of, or maybe I'm trying to put something together that I think is needed, but someone else is going to say, no, that's not an issue.
It's so hard when you have that. It sounds like your passion is really at that point, really building. And man, you worked so hard to make those connections. It's really hard to be kind of shut down or not attended to when you have that drive.
So then it also reinforced those feelings of isolation and feeling neglected and abandoned myself, that I, was thankful I still had my therapist and I was processing all of that. But I remember sitting in his office and saying, maybe I'm trying to clearly telling him, maybe I'm dreaming too much. Maybe this is too big of a dream and it's not something that I should even pursue. And I remember him saying, like, why not? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And so in processing all of that, I'd get a sense of urgency again, and then I would do more cold calling, or I'd call them again and say, okay, maybe they didn't get my message, or maybe they have been busy. And so calling again and sending more emails and saying, look, this is what I'm proposing, because I also didn't have anything concretely laid out when I was calling people. It was still, to me, very early, and there was still an idea, and it was still something that I wanted to kind of flush out and really zone down and say, this is what I wanted to say. This is what I wanted to stand for. This is what I want to provide. And then I also didn't have a location. So then I also thought to myself, where am I going to do these groups? Where am I going to provide this therapy? I don't even have an office yet because I've just had a baby myself and I've, been dealing with my own personal struggle. So then I reached out to a mentor of mine who was a professor in my master's program and someone that I've kept in touch with still. And she's been a great, great support system. And she said, what about, we started brainstorming. She's like, what about parks? What about different rec rooms at parks that you can, propose a class schedule and say, this is what I want to do. And so I started doing that. I started reaching out to parks in the area and writing proposals and saying, this is what I would like to teach. This is what, I want to offer.
That's great.
Put it in the summer schedule or the fall schedule. And then again, I would get no, we're not looking for something like that at the moment, or we're too full with our class schedule. Please try again later.
Yeah.
And so again, the door being closed and I'm like, okay. So then I found a group here at one of our hospitals that was a bilingual group. So she spoke Spanish, but like she said, I'm not, a Latina. I learned Spanish, and so we do some Spanish speaking, but it's not fully in Spanish. And so she said a lot of our moms have to wait for the information to be translated. And she said, and how that can also be difficult because the message gets lost in translation and it's not the same. And so when I connected with her, she's like, how can I help you? And it felt amazing because that's the first time I had actually heard someone say, how can I help you? I'm really excited about what you're proposing to me. It's definitely something that's needed. How can we work together?
I'm Dr. Elliot Berlin, host of the Informed Pregnancy Podcast, where each week we interview experts, celebrities, new and expecting parents, and search for unbiased information on the most pressing topics for growing families. Check out our expansive and growing library on the Informed Pregnancy Podcast. We're on the Pod Network and all major podcast apps, or visit us online at informedpregnancy.com.
If I can just highlight for a moment, at this point, you've already been through so much. Your passion is ignited. And, just for the people who are listening, there are so many things that I think everyone can relate to just in the arc of your story, all of the things that you went through as a mom, as a Latina mother. But also for those of us who have been through some kind of perinatal mental health issue and then developed this passion to work. I love just that you're describing the steps that it took to get to where you are now, because it doesn't just happen. We literally have to bang on doors. And I've personally been turned down for free stuff. I'm trying to offer you free stuff and you don't want me to do it.
Oh my God, Kat. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
it's
exactly
hard.
what happened to me. Absolutely. I said the same thing. I'm offering you something for free.
Right.
And you're still turning me down. And I'm like, wow, I'm not going to make a living even if I wanted to, because that, at some point you're thinking this is going to be something that I want to grow and I want to expand. And like I said, I would tell my therapist, I'm dreaming way too big. Like this isn't going to happen. If people are shutting me down for free.
I know. But the thing is what I found in the specialty, maybe this is what you've seen too, is that once people understand what you do and how important it is, then they're like, oh yeah, we need to be doing this. But for the most part, people think, oh, well, there's not a lot of people who deal with this, or people aren't interested, or they make these assumptions about the services that we're trying to provide, or about the moms that are trying to seek, that may be seeking the services without actually understanding the real problem. So it's almost like you have to explain it, A, B, C. This is what happens. This is why we're doing this, and get people to really understand the depth of importance for this work, and then they're on board. But it takes so much work to do that. It's like you have to convince people almost that moms need this kind of help. It's so frustrating.
It's like you're selling something. It's like you're selling a product. I felt like I was a salesperson at some point. I'm like, if I were to have to be selling a product right now, I'd be a complete failure because I'm not getting anyone to buy anything.
Yeah.
I felt like that's when I realized I have to include education in what I want to do, because I also felt that even bringing this conversation to the moms was a difficult subject, because a lot of moms felt that, okay, I am going through this, but isn't that just part of being a mom?
Exactly.
Isn't that just normal?
Yes.
Or, my husband looks at me and says I should be doing all of this because that's what his mom used to do. And then my mother-in-law saying the same thing. My mom's telling me the same thing. My aunts, my grandmothers, that's just what everyone did. So this is part of being a mom. So I shouldn't feel
that like self-sacrificing part too.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is an issue. And there was like, okay, that's when I started realizing the components that I wanted to include as far as education, raising awareness, how do I help break these stigmas? And like you said earlier, this is when you realize with now new terminology, when we talk about Latinx, where I realized, okay, there's a lot of, moms out there too, millennial moms, that we now have a new word where some are not identifying as Latina. Now, like you said, there's transgendered moms. And so now it's like, okay, how do I also incorporate that? Because I don't want someone to not feel that they're being heard or that they're being validated or that their story matters because of a term that they don't identify with.
Right.
So to me, all of that is also a learning process because I didn't find out about that term itself till this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was starting all of this, what are we in 2017? When I was starting this, like back in 2016 and brainstorming, I wasn't even on social media yet. I had such a horrible experience with social media when I was in grad school that I completely disconnected from the entire process. And I'm like, I don't see myself on social media again, never realizing all the amazing connections and everything that I would learn from it now. But, when I had my son, I wasn't on social media. I had no one to connect with as far as moms. All of it has also been in a major learning process for myself.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
because
just like you are describing, going from saying Latina mothers to including Latinx, meaning anyone who identifies, that's a gender neutral term.
Exactly.
And for anyone who's identifying as a mother, I mean, that is a shift, and it's a shift we're all, understanding and needing to make too. It's a big education.
And then, absolutely. And then learning about how important mental health for a mom is, how crucial it is to take care of it, what a priority is. So as I'm trying to make these steps towards starting something in my community, I'm also learning what it is that I need to include. How can I educate these people I'm presenting this information to so that they say to me, oh, yes, you know what? We do need to have this.
Yeah.
We do need to work on this. So it takes time. Absolutely. You hit it on the nail. It's something that does not happen overnight. I remember when I met with one of the hospitals here who now I have a support group with.
There you go.
It took about a year. It took about a year for things to even pick up. I had groups happening in all these different locations that unfortunately, had their own timelines of, we can only do a group here for 4 weeks because then that place shut down and they were relocating. And then we can only do a group here for, 2 months because then they were also relocating. So then it was a lot of inconsistency with things. I was doing things, but yet still feeling like a failure. Like I was getting the word out, but still felt like this isn't enough. This isn't enough.
You know what? If I can say, I mean, that feeling like this isn't enough, I think comes directly from passion and compassion for the moms, because you know how important this is. And not everybody else knows how important it is. But I think that's almost like a parallel process that we have as providers helping moms who also don't feel like they're doing enough. Like, there are times with me for this podcast and for the stuff that I do where I'm like, this is not enough because not everybody knows about this yet. I just think it's part of the passion that you have for getting the word out because you know how important it is. And it sounds like you're just waiting for everybody else to figure it out too. But then you have to literally teach them, like, scream out at them like, hey, we have to do something about this. I think that's your passion talking.
And you know what? Absolutely. When you reframe your thoughts and you say, because we're so used to just focusing on the negative, we're so used to always kind of being in problem mode and thinking this isn't going to work out and, I'm a complete failure. I mean, I had been feeling incompetent as a mother, 2 years already. I had completely lost my identity. I felt useless as a woman. I thought, oh my God, I went through all this education and I'm not doing absolutely anything with it.
So hard.
I'm not able to sit down and work on my dissertation, lost my dad. I felt disconnected with my husband because it was a huge strain on our marriage as well.
Sure.
It was absolutely a very difficult time for us where, Most of the time I felt like, okay, you know what? Yes, we're going to get a divorce. Like, it's just going to happen. Like, this isn't, I'm done. Like, I have no more fight in me. And then I was always angry. I was angry, just thinking back, the person who took my dad's life away, why did that have to happen? And all this other stuff that I had to go through with trials and court cases with that just felt like the world was like, okay, I must have done something so horribly wrong because everything is just happening to me all at once. And there's no point in continuing.
Oh my gosh, it's all so devastating.
It is, because I did get to a point where I felt like it was just best to end my life. And I thought about those things at times while I was holding my son and putting him to sleep and nursing him. But yet it was this conflict that I had where it's like, I don't want to, feel this way anymore. Right. I want to end my life. How would I go about doing that? But then thinking, when I would look at him and he was like that thread that I was hanging on, and thinking, no, but he needs me, and I don't want to stop seeing this little face. And, and
sometimes
and so
that's how it is. It's just the baby that gets, it's so hard.
Nursing him and rocking him and completely bawling and bawling and bawling. And my husband, I remember, would come in and say, what is wrong? And I had no words to explain what was wrong.
Right. Because how are you supposed to explain it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we don't know.
Out. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's so much, just so many traumatizing things.
Yeah. And sometimes he says he would catch me just like staring into space and still holding on to Isaac, that I would not have, Isaac was completely asleep, and I had not transferred him into his bassinet or his crib because I would just zone out. I would just hold him there and keep rocking it, and I'm sure it must have freaked him out, to think like, what is going on? But I think that he just didn't know. And that's another thing that I thought while I was going through this process. I'm like, if men don't know what's going on, how do they provide that support, or how do other people around that mother provide that support if they don't know what's going on, if they don't know what to call it, if they don't know, that there is something wrong, or they think, well, she seems fine. She got out of bed. She fed the baby. She changed them. Some of those things are just the norm. You're thinking, well, that's fine. She got out of bed and she changed him. She fed him, so she must be good.
Yeah. I'm curious because there's a lot of different stuff woven in here in terms of, some of that stuff that, all couples and all moms experience who are having a hard time. But you've also raised a couple of issues around cultural understanding of what this period of time is like. And I wonder, from the work that you do and from your own personal experience, what are some of the culture specific things that make this period of time harder for moms, for Latinx moms?
One of them is just the expectations placed on us that we are supposed to handle everything, regardless of the fact that you just had a baby. You're still supposed to get up and take care of your partner or your spouse. You're still supposed to, entertain your family members. You're still supposed to get up and cook a meal. And there's this thing that, as I look back now, I'm thinking, these expectations were killing me. I felt guilty that I wasn't doing any of this. I felt guilty that, I wasn't taking care of my husband because that's what was expected of me. I had moments where I thought my husband's going to divorce me because he's going to find someone else that's providing the care that I'm not providing because that's what's expected of me. And it's interesting because I have a new client where she's saying, like, it's 11 o'clock at night. My husband gets home and he still goes and wakes me up to warm up the food and serve him dinner, even though it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm sleeping and I've been dealing with, the baby who's 3 months all day. But that's because that's what's expected of her. She identifies as a Latina mom, and she says, that's expected of me. So I have to get up and warm up his food and serve him his dinner. And I think unbelievable the amount of pressure that is placed on us. Because this is what's been done for so many years. Like I said, this is what our mothers did, our grandmothers did. And even though they may have had moments, because I remember my mom had moments where I would find her upset or I'd hear her cry, but it was not something she would share. It's not something that, was discussed. And I always question what could have been the issue. And I'm thinking back, maybe she just had it, she had her breaking points. We're all humans. So the fact that so much pressure is put on us culturally, I think also religiously, when I mentioned, the Virgin Mary, if you're raised Catholic, you're held up to the standard of, I remember reading a term that caught my attention immediately that's called Marianismo. And it's that term that describes how we put so much amount of pressure on mothers because we're holding them up to the standard of the Virgin Mary. Here's the Virgin Mary who's seen it's placed on such a high pedestal and it's given so much glorification. And here we are as human beings, as mothers, striving to be the best mom. And we're, in a sense, kind of put onto that standard, like, well, this is what the Virgin Mary sacrificed, and in our religion, Catholicism, we glorify her. So then we must sacrifice our own being as a woman and as a mother so that everyone else in the house is happy and taken care of. That means kids, extended family, husbands, partners, and you're put on the back burner. We're not taught, culturally to speak up. We're not taught to be assertive. We're not taught to talk about our feelings or emotions. So that submissive role that has been passed along for generations through our mothers and grandmothers and so forth is something that is still, I believe, expected from us. Even, as much education as we have. Like, I know, I'm a first college, in my family that attended college, and I'm an only child. And my dad was very, very encouraging when it came to pushing me towards education and being someone and dreaming big. But I know that we still have these specific gender roles where, the women cook and clean and take care of the spouse and take care of everything else. And the husband just goes out to work, comes home, and you must have, the plate of food on the table and allow him the time to check, to zone out and let him watch his TV because he's been working all day. So the respect isn't given to what the mother does. It's a lot of, well, if you stay home with your child, you must be sitting there watching TV all day and having, kind of like that Peggy Bundy assumption where she's sitting in front of TV having bonbons and you're having a great time. And I've been a stay-at-home mom for quite some time, and I'm thinking, you do more work at home than you do outside of the house. Like being a stay-at-home mom, and then for those who go out and work and have more than one child and are taking care of, family members, because that ends up happening. It's a lot. And for that work to be diminished and not giving the value and not being appreciated because you're not coming home with specifically a paycheck like your spouse is, that's a lot of pressure.
That's sort of a difficult in the sense that, like, you're on one hand very highly regarded and highly valued, and the expectation is that you do a lot, but then it's also, and I'm using my own terms here, I hope this doesn't come across as, disrespectful, but almost like taken for granted.
No, that is a perfect term, because that's exactly how in our culture, a women's work, a mother's work is absolutely taken for granted. You're not appreciated. It's expected of you. Like I always say, as a mom in general, I think you'd realize that, we don't have sick days. If you're sick, you still have to get up and push through it. Those are things that, now that I joke with other moms, like, we don't have sick days. We don't have leisure days. There's no such thing as you're going to call in and say, I'm not coming in. No, if you're a mom and you're sick, you still have to get up and take care of your children.
Yeah.
But Latina, Latinx culture, it's expected. It's absolutely expected. I remember seeing it with my mother.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it with other people in our, other women in our neighborhood. I remember seeing it with other family members. And I remember feeling that immense amount of pressure when I had a child and I wasn't ready to host people. I remember also hearing the grunt of comments and negativity from people, because according to them, I was steering away from my cultural values. I was doing things differently.
Okay, right. So, that's a great point. Just, you're in the U.S., so there's this other acculturation piece where, it sounds like people were saying, like, you weren't doing your job, and it's because, you're doing things different, kind of because you're here. That sort of pressure. That's what makes it difficult, is that you are here, and the culture here is different, with some basic stuff, and you don't have the additional support of, like, can I ask where your family's from?
Well, both my parents are Central American. My dad from Guatemala and my mom from El Salvador, and my husband's family is Central American as well. We were both born here. And so that's another, you hit a good point, because one thing that I also realized that in our culture we don't teach a lot of is kind of setting healthy boundaries and limits. There's a lot of expectation that if something is going on. I come from a small family as an only child, so I really don't know the stories with bigger families, but I have seen them, and I understand that there's a sense of you all kind of come together and help one another out. But I also felt that there was an invasion of privacy with that, that there's the sense of everyone needs to know what's going on and being in your business and putting in their 2 cents. And that's something that I had an issue with from the get-go. And I remember when I had my son, I said, the only people that I want in the room is my mother and my husband. I'm like, my dad can wait outside. Everyone else can wait outside. And I remember a really good friend of mine saying that her family, when she was going to have her boys, she's like, Susie, they thought that this was like some kind of circus and I was going to put on a show and that I was going to have everyone in there. And she set some limits. She's a clinician herself. So she's like, I set limits right away and said, these are the only people. So I suggest you stick to what you've decided. Well, I remember my mother-in-law had a fit and she just thought that it was so inappropriate that I was leaving her out. And my issue was, A, you're right. This isn't a circus show. I'm not out, putting on a show for people to be entertained. I'm having my child and I only want these 2 specific people in there. Plus, I felt, A, she had 8 grandkids before. She has her own daughter that she experienced this with. So you've been there, you've done that, and that's great. This is my mom's one and only time. She needs to have her own space. And that was something that I created from the beginning, like that space. I want it to be respected. I want these boundaries to be respected. But that was something that people kept reminding me of how against my culture I was going for doing that.
Right. So I wonder, like, I'm thinking in terms of how many things may have felt unintentionally shaming or made you feel like you should be fine and not reach out for help. I mean, there are so many factors in it. I'm also assuming there are some really beautiful parts of the culture that are actually, very supportive. And then also here you are dealing with depression and anxiety, and there's very close to no resources for you, or none that you can find, or that you even know that you can ask for. And just thinking then of, the moms that you're helping now too, like how, I'm going to just assume for a moment that they are, and generalize for a moment, and that they are sort of in a similar kind of predicament where they don't, again, I'm highly generalizing, but where they don't even know that like what's going on for them is something that they can look for help for, and that it's okay to do that. How are you reaching out to moms and letting them know that it's okay to come and get services, and how are you helping them?
So luckily I was able to start the group in the hospital. And so they have their OB clinic, and I've done, meetings with them and letting them know that this is available for not just the women who are in the hospital, but for anyone in the community. I am working really hard on doing more community outreach, because I have tried calling a few organizations that still don't understand the importance of it. So I've gotten a few closed doors with that. But it's a lot of putting myself out there and just going to these places that, for example, when I find that there's other events going on in the community that have to do with healthcare, or, I've gotten involved with other organizations and with other colleagues that do work specifically for mothers, like the WIC program, or programs such as they have baby showers out in the community where they're working with like Molina Healthcare, and they're providing, raffle items and so forth for pregnant moms. So just definitely attending those and bringing my pamphlets and bringing my flyers and letting know this is who I am, this is what I provide, this is what's available, and just striking these conversations. In the group, it's been nice that, you have a flow of different moms coming in, some hearing from other moms or some hearing from the clinics themselves in the hospital. Social media has really helped to kind of start the conversation going. People DMing me with questions and saying like, hey, this is something that I thought about. Do how can I get information about this? And social media, like I said, has now been such a positive thing for me because I've also connected with, I connected with you. And then I have found other resources out here in our area in Long Beach, like Long Beach Breastfeeds. And so I immediately reached out to the founder of that organization and said, hey, we're working specifically with moms. Let's sit down. Let's get together. Let's grab coffee. Let's talk.
Good
We
for you.
need
That
to
is
have
awesome.
this conversation.
Yeah.
And so really it's been a lot of reaching out to people and saying, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm here for. And so thankfully now I've gotten a bit more response from organizations and people who are interested in hearing more and saying, wow, we really didn't even think about including that in, let's say, our, baby program, the programs from the hospitals where they go check in on moms, to make sure that everything's okay. They really don't have the tools to assess if there's, depression or anxiety or the different types of questions, or where do I send them if there is, like the screening tools, like where do I send them if they actually do meet that criteria?
So you're like both reaching out and kind of a resource too.
Yes, absolutely. So reaching out, saying this is who I am, let's talk. Because I really think that education is such a preventative measure as well, because I feel that the more education you have on these issues, on anything in general, there's ways of at some point maybe even able to prevent this in another mom, because you can prepare differently. And I always tell the moms that I work with, we go in thinking we have to prepare the nursery. We have to prepare, our birthing plan. We have to prepare, financially for a child because it's going to cost us. But we don't think about how do we prepare our mental and our emotional health? How do I get myself, to a place where I have that support system if I need it? Or let's say you are struggling with depression and anxiety while you're pregnant, which is something that I had not realized that I was actually going through.
Right.
I didn't know that my depression and my anxiety had actually started while I was pregnant. I thought it was just the pressure of working full time and finishing up my doctorate program that I was under so much stress. That's how I disguised it.
Right.
And I thought, this is what it is. And the fact that I'm a first-time mom and I'm just, I'm not afraid, just anxious about being a mom in general. But I didn't realize it wasn't until later down the road that I'm like, aha, that's exactly what that was.
Right.
And so now I've also branched out to working with moms who are currently pregnant because, like I said, I've met doulas. And again, I didn't know they existed. And then, so now I'm working with some doulas and saying, let's start something where we're providing this information at pregnancy and not waiting till after. Because at least it's like, okay, I'm pregnant. How can I create a postpartum plan? We don't really have to put a lot of money into a baby shower. Why don't we look into something where I assign, you delegate some responsibilities to your friends and you say, hey, for the first week, you're coming to help me. And, and for the first week, would it be nice if, you stop by and help me so that I can have that opportunity for a nap or a shower?
Well,
and so
I just
think
love that. Using the community, using the resources that already exist just in a different way and helping people think differently about how they can use the supports that are sort of closest to them. I mean, this is really necessary on the ground, and potentially maybe out of the box thinking to get the support to people. And I can hear the passion in your voice. I just love it. There's so much that you're doing to connect people in your community together, maybe even people who wouldn't typically think of working together. You're just like, hey, let's do this. And I love it. And for the therapists who are listening, or the moms who have had their own personal experience and they want to start something, I mean, this is what it sounds like. Your process, your story, this is what it is. It takes a little bit of time. It's hard to imagine that once you know how difficult it is, it's hard to imagine that other people won't just get it and love what you're doing and want to support you to do that and want to see it grow. But it's this, day in and day out, kind of pounding the pavement, questioning yourself a little bit. Is this going to work? Is this worth it? All of that. I just so appreciate and thank you for that. Oh yeah, me too.
I still go through those days. I honestly, last night was having a conversation with my husband about it where I'm like, should I do something different? Is this working? Did I give it the right name? Did I do this properly? Am I missing something? Should I go ahead and just change it all up? And he's like, why fix what isn't broken? It's going to take some time. And he's like, let's look back. When did you start this? What have you gained so far? What do you want it to look like? And then I'm thinking, you're right. It hasn't been easy. I'm still getting people to close the doors on me. I'm still getting emails not responded and phone calls. And I'm like, but I'm in a better place myself where now my drive feels a lot stronger. I feel like I can dedicate more time to actually pushing through, hurdles that are placed in our way so that I can make this something bigger. Because I do look at this and I say, hey, when I went to the hospital, I'm like, I want this to be bigger. Like, I want to be able to create this to where it's being used at other hospitals in the area where there is some kind of funding happening. Like, help me. Like, I was like, who do I talk to get this funding? What do I need to propose? Like, what kind of grants are out there? And yes, you do get some people where you're like, well, you kind of give you the runaround and the budget cuts and this and that. And you're like, oh, and I understand that.
But we need...
Because I come from a community mental health background, I'm so excited about still being able to do some community work because I feel that it's so beneficial.
Yeah, I think all the Latinx parents really need this and need you and need your drive and need your passion. I'm really hoping that, other people who are thinking of starting things in their communities to help their moms, specifically Latina moms or whatever kind of group that you feel like needs a really specific and compassionate extra look at maternal mental health, that it's not just one size fits all. There are some real cultural dynamics that play a part into this, and people who aren't of that culture can try, but it really takes people who within their own culture to see the need and to make this change. And,
very true.
I mean, you're doing such a beautiful job of it. And I know it's frustrating, but you just keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank you. Yes. And I'm glad, to hear that the validation coming from your end, because I've been following you since I, got on social media and I've read your story and, I've checked your website millions of times, always thinking like, I know I can learn from her. And something that I always wanted to, I was so looking forward to meeting you in July. And it's something that I still would love to sit down and talk to you, because I remember when I originally reached out to you, I'm like, I just want to pick your brain. Like, I just want to learn and see what the process has been like. So to hear you say, that you still have those days of frustration or where it wasn't easy for you too, and, that you've dealt with those doors being closed, it's so validating for me, because it reminds me of why I'm doing this and what I want to accomplish with it. And it tells me like, it's okay. You're going to have those days, but get back up and push through and continue pushing through. So I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm glad. I mean, I think that the realness is important for all of us who are doing this work.
Yes.
There are things that I have tried that have failed or that didn't work out. Absolutely. I still get the door closed on me often enough. But yeah, that's part of this. Not everyone is going to understand the need for maternal mental health support or specifically for Latina moms or whatever. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means they don't get it.
That's true. No, that's very true. And I thank you so much, because like I said, I've always looked at this when I started. I'm like, how can I do something groundbreaking in the sense of opening up a space and opening up that conversation for us? Like, let's also include us Latina moms, because like you said, culturally, someone else may have thought of something that could help us. But if you're not from that culture, you're not going to have the same understanding as someone who is from that culture that can definitely see what is missing, what are the components that need to be, put in place to create a space for moms to come in and say, oh, okay, now I get it. And that's one of the things when I started creating the group specifically in Spanish, because I said, I don't want to do something bilingual. I want that if a mom needs to hear it in Spanish and that's all she speaks, that's exactly what she's going to get. And I've done, and I have the English groups as well. So when I got moms coming into the Spanish group specifically for that, I remember them saying, you have no idea how much I've wanted this, because the bilingual group, there was a connection and it helped at some point, but I still felt like I walked out of there not knowing what half of the things that were being said or feeling confused and lost.
Yeah.
And
you don't need that when you're dealing with depression and anxiety.
Absolutely not.
Just
so
like,
when you said realness, I would tell them, look, you could cry and you could curse and if this is what you need to do to get your point across, and the connections that were formed,
right.
It was absolutely wonderful to see how much this was needed in the community. So I'm so proud of being able to provide that.
Yes.
But I'm also so happy to see in my mind how else, can I keep pushing this forward? Like, how much bigger can I make so that it reaches not just this community, but other communities, whether in LA County or Orange County, that are needing these services because they're not out there.
Right. Well, I'm hopeful that even if you're not at the, starting each of those groups individually, that whoever's listening is inspired to do similar work. There just absolutely needs to be, ideally a postpartum perinatal support group in every language possible that is centered within the cultural understandings of those moms. And again,
Absolutely.
You can't necessarily meet everybody's cultural needs all the time, even within the same culture, but man, can you miss a lot when you don't really understand it?
Very true.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story and your process and all of the things you see for Latina moms. I would love for us to wrap up on, what you want Latinx moms to know and or providers who are supporting Latina mothers. What would you like us to know?
Well, as far as for Latinx moms, what I would like them to know is that they're not alone, that the expectations that are placed on us by our culture and our families are too much for us to handle. And we need to start learning how to break those expectations and just doing what works for us, for our immediate family. We should not feel guilty about that whatsoever, because I think that when we start focusing on what everyone else needs and forget about ourselves, this is just going to perpetuate that cycle. So I always tell the moms that I work with is, if you do not take care of yourself, always ask yourself, who will?
Yeah.
If you don't take care of yourself, who will? And we need to start putting ourselves first so that everyone else is taken care of. So biggest takeaway for Latinx moms is, don't be afraid of asking for help. Do not be afraid of reaching out to a professional because family says that you shouldn't, or that it's such a big stigma to, ask for help, that, we keep everything within our four walls and within just our immediate family. No, there's no need for that. You do not want to carry that pressure and that weight by yourself. There's absolutely someone out there willing and available and trained, or another mom friend who can be there to support you. So biggest takeaway is ask for help. Do not be afraid. It will only be something very beneficial for you in the long run. Awesome. And for providers who are working with Latinx mothers, I think that one of the biggest takeaways is asking more about how the culture can be playing, how cultural traditions and even lack of support, because we tend to, think that, everyone who is having a child has a great support system. Their parents must, be available, or their spouses. And we forget to realize a lot of moms are single. There's a lot of single moms. There's a lot of moms who have migrated here and have absolutely nobody. And we don't take those things into consideration when we're assessing and when we're questioning or doing screenings, that a lot of these other factors are going to play a huge role when it comes to what that mother, may be struggling with at that moment. We forget that they can also have, a partner who's incarcerated, or have, no resources because of a language barrier or lack of finances. So we have to go individually. I think every provider who does a screening for a Latinx mom has to treat it case by case. There's no generalizations. There's no assumptions, because I've come to realize that even being in the same culture, I can't assume or generalize.
Right.
Everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different support system. Everyone has so many different resources, and yet at the same time, so many lack of resources. For someone, it could be language. For someone, it could be financial. For someone, it could be being a single mom and not having anyone here of a family member. So I think we need to treat things on a case by case and be more understanding of all the other factors that can play a role in that mother having a hard time adjusting to motherhood.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That's really, really great. Yeah, very important points. And I really hope that, anybody who's listening, just sharing your story, thank you so much. And your process to getting to where you are now and helping moms is great. And if anyone out there feels inspired to start a language-based support group within your community, man, is it needed? So I thank you so much for being on with us and taking the time out of your day to share your experience and your professional work.
Thank you. You know what? Thank you for having me. You just fulfilled like one of my biggest dreams in this process.
What?
And I was so excited for this conversation with you today. And I couldn't stop sharing with my husband, like who you were and what you do and what you mean to maternal mental health in general. And I'm like, I didn't get to meet her at the conference, but I know that we're going to make it happen. And I'm like, and now she's asked me, to be on her podcast. I'm like, you have no idea. This is the things where I'm like, so I've had the doors closed and I've had rejection, and I'm sure it's going to continue to happen. But this just made it so much more better for me and just validated what I'm doing and highlighted all the good stuff that has happened. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, Kat. I'm so excited to hear the final process.
Well, thank you so much. That's just beautiful. I'm so happy, so happy to know that you're out there doing the work and that we could touch base and connect and share this with everyone. If you'd like to be connected with Susana, please find her at her website, memyselfandmommy.com. You can also find her on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at memyselfandmommy. As usual, if you are new to the Mom and Mind podcast, please do subscribe so you can get each of our weekly episodes downloaded straight to your phone or computer. And also look through our huge back catalog of episodes of over 100 to find episodes that resonate for you. Connect with us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Or join us at the Mom and Mind Connection Facebook group, where we are growing our community to take these conversations just a touch deeper. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time. By joining us today, you are part of the growing community of people who are aware and concerned for mothers and families during this beautiful and sometimes very difficult time of life. If you or someone you know is having a hard time, help is available. You can feel better. Please look for resources for help at momandmind.com. Together, we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Mom and Mind community.